Welcome back to the deep dive. We've gathered some fascinating source material about one person's really winding career path over decades. And today, our mission is to unpack this journey, looking at how someone we're calling H navigated some huge nonlinear shifts in his professional life.
Absolutely. We're starting with him making what seemed like very conservative choices in China finance, state banking.
Right, the safe path. But then he ends up executing this massive pivot, geographically, professionally, landing a senior finance role at the UN in New York.
And it's more than just a story, isn't it? It's really a case study in cognitive dissonance.
That friction when what you're doing clashes with who you are.
Exactly. It's about external expectations, family culture, clashing with this dawning realization that his work environment was just fundamentally wrong for him. He got to a point where career success, on paper, actually felt like a failure of self.
And that's the key takeaway for you, the listener, I think. H's journey really highlights that maybe the biggest risk isn't taking a chance on something new, but sticking with something safe that guarantees you'll be miserable long term.
It really makes you question the cost of avoiding those big, intentional choices. For H, finding fulfillment, finding that autonomy, it required real courage in the short term.
Okay, so let's rewind. Let's go right back to the start. Trace those initial conservative choices. High school in Guangdong province. He said it was relatively relaxed for him.
Yeah, relaxed because he was efficient, very focused on study methods. But to get why he leaned towards risk aversion later, you have to understand the system back then, around 2006. He mentioned something pretty anxiety-inducing about university admissions.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
They had to choose their target university and the specific program before they knew their final exam scores.
Wait, really? So you're basically placing a bet?
Exactly. It turns the whole thing into this high-stakes gamble based on your predicted score.
Okay, I see. So how did H handle that?
Well, he identified himself straight away as risk-averse.
Yeah.
He wasn't aiming for the absolute top-tier school necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
His goal was to secure a good program, something solid, at a university he felt was safely within reach.
Zongda, right. Sun Yat-sen University.
Yeah.
So he aimed for certainty over prestige, maybe?
Precisely. He figured he might have been able to aim higher, but the risk of missing out and ending up in a weaker program at a top school wasn't worth it. He wanted that guarantee.
And that systematic, certainty-focused approach even freed up time. I think he mentioned dating his future wife back then.
He did. It's a great little detail, right? It shows his methodical approach. He hit his target without completely maxing out because the target itself was set conservative.
Which brings us to the major, business administration, finance. Why that field, given his maybe non-passionate approach?
Well, this is where the external factors really kick in. He admitted later feeling somewhat regretful.
Regretful. Why?
It was largely driven by his family's perspective. Back in 2006, information wasn't as widespread, and the thinking was very much about what leads to a good career, what makes it easy to find work. Finance seemed like the obvious, safe answer.
So a practical choice, not a passion choice, and he regretted it later.
Deeply, in a specific way. He found himself learning all this complex management theory, how banks work, advanced finance, but without any real-world experience to hang it on. No social context, no work context.
Oh, I can see that. Abstract theory without practice.
Exactly. He now thinks undergrads should focus on foundational stuff, philosophy, history, logic, core sciences, things that teach you how to think. Save the broad, applied subjects like management for grad school, maybe, once you've actually worked and know what the real problems are.
That's a really powerful insight for anyone choosing a degree now. Learn to think first, apply later.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so post-college, he skips grad school, family finances, still a factor, focuses on internships, networking, practical stuff, and then lands a job in the Chinese state-owned banking system, which sounds, well, perfectly aligned with that initial risk-averse plan.
It was the logical next step based on that blueprint, absolutely. But this is where that value conflict really ignited.
The culture clash.
Big time. The actual skills, accounting, finance, they were fine. They fit his degree. But the culture, that was a huge psychological mismatch for him.
How so? What was the friction point?
Well, H values professional expertise, right? Using knowledge to get results. But he found the bank operated on what he called old school thinking. It heavily prioritized networking, relationship building, Guangxi.
Ah, Guangxi. So less about what you know, more about who you know and the favors, the connections.
You got it. And for someone systematic like H who believes in meritocracy, that must have been incredibly frustrating. The rules he trusted were being bypassed by this informal social game.
Was that the only issue?
No, there was another layer. He also saw this intense focus on short-term interests, short-term gains, which meant neglecting the foundational long-term stuff, especially in roles like internal assessment, where you really need that long view for stability.
So a culture mismatch and a structural problem with priorities. Okay, I can see why he'd feel alienated. His work just wasn't reflecting his values or his idea of sound practice.
Exactly. He felt it wasn't aligned with his self-identity anymore. He knew he had to leave.
But leaving a stable, state-owned bank job, that's a huge leap, right? Especially in that system. Did he just jump?
That's the thing. The internal unhappiness was building, but he needed an external push, a catalyst.
And that came from?
His wife. She was working in a hedge fund, and she got this major job offer from the United Nations. The catch: it required moving to New York City.
The perfect escape hatch. He could use the geographical move as the reason.
Precisely. It gave him the opening. And instead of just looking for another finance job in the U.S., he went for a total reset.
When involved.
He enrolled in an MBA program in New York to upskill. But crucially, at the same time, he started preparing for the UN's Young Professionals Program exam, the YPP.
That YPT is notoriously difficult, isn't it? Requires intense preparation.
Oh, incredibly tough. Months of specialized study. It shows just how serious he was about this change. He wasn't just drifting. He was actively building a completely new path. He'd clearly checked out of the old system mentally long before.
Okay, so he makes the leap, gets through the YPP. Where did he land within the UN system? What's he doing now?
He entered through that program about 5 years ago. He's been working in various financial roles, handling payment approvals, setting up banking channels, internal audit reporting, complex stuff.
And just to be clear for the listener, he's working for the UN organization itself, right? Not as a diplomat for the Chinese mission.
Correct. He's an international civil servant, part of the administrative and financial machinery of the UN. It's a huge, complex bureaucracy that needs all sorts of specialists, just like any large government or corporation.
And it seems like this environment finally clicks for him. He's even planning a rotation, maybe Thailand or Geneva.
Yeah, that mobility is part of the package.
Yeah.
And it definitely seems like a better fit. Let's talk about the benefits he mentioned, because they directly address the pain points from his previous job.
Okay, what did he highlight?
First off, compensation. He said, look, it's public service, but the pay is high. Very near the top, are his words. Only places like the World Bank or IMF really pay more in that sector.
Which you need in places like New York or Geneva.
Yeah.
Right. High cost of living. But it provides that security he lacked early on.
Exactly. Financial stability, autonomy. Second, and this is crucial given his past experience, inclusion and diversity. He stressed that having staff from over 100 countries creates this inherent baseline of tolerance. You're judged more in your work.
He actually said, you won't feel any discomfort or discrimination. That's a powerful statement after the Guangxi culture.
Isn't it? Professionalism over connections. Third benefit, the sheer scope of the work.
Right. People think the UN, they think peacekeeping or aid workers.
But H pointed out they need finance people, IT specialists, economists, logisticians, pretty much any expertise you can think of. You could build a whole career, even pivot internally.
And the last one?
Work-life balance. After the grind and the relationship demands of the bank, he described the UN job as stable. It allows time for hobbies, personal life, meeting diverse people, doing what you like, as he put it.
Sounds pretty good. Was there a downside? A trade-off?
Yeah, the classic public sector trade-off. Promotions are slower. It's tied more to seniority, waiting for vacancies to open up. You can hit bottlenecks.
So stability and balance, but maybe not rapid advancement.
Exactly. You sacrifice that velocity for the values for the environment. For H, that seems to have been the right exchange. He found his equilibrium.
So looking back on this whole winding journey, the conservative start, the culture clash, the big pivot, finding a fit at the UN, what's the core lesson H takes away from it all?
It really boils down to the power of making proactive choices. He had this great quote, something like, you shouldn't be making choices passively, but should be choosing according to your predetermined goals.
Don't just drift, basically. Steer the ship.
Right. And he stressed that when you feel that deep mismatch, that fundamental clash between your environment and your sense of self, you just have to find the courage to change.
It wasn't just about the job description for him, was it? It was deeper. Soul versus spreadsheet, maybe.
Nicely put. And he also offered some comfort about making mistakes along the way. He said, even if early choices feel wrong, later stages of life give you chances to slowly mend the error. You can course correct.
That's such an important point for anyone listening who feels stuck. The fear of making the wrong move can be paralyzing.
But H's insight is that you need to assess the risk realistically. Yes, think about money, time, networks lost, but also weigh that against the cost of not changing.
And maybe recognize that your ability to fix a mistake later is often greater than your current fear of making one.
Exactly. Which leads perfectly into his time machine thought. If you could go back and talk to his younger self,
What would he say?
he said he'd wish he'd been more autonomous or more courageous to make decisions that were previously avoided or more challenging.
Wow. Even though he ended up in a good place, he still wishes he'd taken more risks earlier.
Yeah. Because he recognizes now, looking back, that even if he'd stumbled more by being braver, he now has the capacity and the resources to handle those stumbles. He regrets the avoided risk, the lack of earlier autonomy.
That's really powerful. The safety net isn't just avoiding falls, it's knowing you can get back up.
That sums it up perfectly. H found his alignment in this huge, diverse international system only after confronting that fundamental conflict he felt in the more constrained domestic one.
So here's the final thought we want to leave you with today, something to maybe chew on. If your current situation feels comfortable, maybe even like an easy win, like H's high school choices felt safe and achievable at the time, what might be the hidden long-term cost of that comfort? Is there a potential lack of autonomy you're not seeing? And crucially, what challenging decision are you avoiding right now that your future, more capable self could probably handle much more easily than you fear?